Welcome to our class tonight. It is June 8th, and it's a good idea to order my book if you want to have the best book on gardening in the whole world. Can't believe I said that, but I'm sure glad I did. Week 56, so we just passed our year landmark of doing these free Q&As on Thursday nights, and so that has been incredibly fun. Welcome to Gardening with William DeMille. This is our Thursday Q&A, where I help you have the very best garden of your entire life. This is where we discuss gardening, farming, livestock, the Georgic tradition, soil health, education, and the purpose of this is to help you have the very best garden in the whole world. We're going to get right into our questions tonight. These are some questions I got very recently, so we're going to go through these. Question number one is, should I rake up the pine needles and throw them away or leave them there on the ground to contribute to the detritosphere? First of all, the detritosphere is the dead, non-living, organic matter that is on your soil surface. The purpose for the detritosphere is to feed your beneficial microorganisms that are on the ground and in the ground that create a functioning soil so that you never have to buy fertilizer again. To the home gardening context, $20 a year for fertilizer is no big deal, but for the big farming context, if you are spending tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on fertilizer, this is a big deal. So, should I rake up the pine needles? Absolutely not, unless you want to. But as far as soil health goes, if it falls on the ground and it is a leaf from a tree, you're supposed to leave them there. That's why they are called leaves. And pine needles are leaves of the pine tree. Now, will other things grow under the pine trees, under the spruce trees, and under the fir trees? No, because pines, firs, and spruces have their own built-in weeding chemicals that they drop onto the ground. It generally turns the soil a little acid, and it's very good for the late succession of fungal-loving plants like trees. And that is one reason that other plants won't grow under many of these trees. So if you want a lot of vegetation growing under your conifers, then you need to be working on that soil and making it happen, which is, it's a hard thing to do because you have a late succession dominant tree and it is creating a soil to have late succession plants. Hopefully that was helpful. If that's not helpful, let me know once you see this and read this and hear this, and then we can continue on in that because pine trees are pretty awesome. There are other things you can do with pine needles. You can pick up the pine needles and you can use them as a mulch around your strawberries because strawberries are a late succession plant. So it will help to control other weeds, but the pine needles will help the strawberries to grow really well because that's where the strawberries naturally live is in late succession. So it helps to create that soil. So no, you don't rake them up and throw them away because they're bad, but maybe you would rake them up and use them in a context to enhance your other gardening, like I just said about the strawberries. Question number 2 tonight. I bought worms recently. I need to know what to do with them. Can I feed them cardboard? Absolutely, you can feed them cardboard. Cardboard is made out of wood. Wood is a fantastic and a wonderful food for the late succession plants. Earthworms are going to eat the cardboard. And so, yeah, it's fantastic. You can just let the worms go into your garden. You can keep them in a worm bin. You can, there's all kinds of things you can do with the worms. Usually, if you're going to buy worms to help build soil, you just turn them directly loose into your garden. And if you go out and you start digging around in your garden and you can't find the worms, that's because there are usually hundreds of thousands of worms in a garden and they will spread out and not really be there. But how do you keep them healthy and happy? You need to keep the soil covered. cover that soil with any kind of anything that rots. So, wood chips, shredded paper, shredded cardboard, that kind of thing can be going on that soil surface. And of course, finished compost is fantastic, and grass clippings, leaves that you rake up on your lawn, all that stuff can go on your surface of your soil. The worms will love that environment, and they will be a major and massive contributor in a very positive way to build your soils. Question number 3, I heard of a milpa garden. Do you know what that is? Yes, a milpa garden. Those are gardens that they come from Central America, and it's a native way of the Central American people who live down there in the jungles. I'm not quite sure what country, but they do the Three Sisters type gardening where they just mix everything up. And Three Sisters comes from the Native Americans from the more northern hemisphere up here, and not so much the central area. But the word milpa comes from the Native Americans down there in Central America. So that's where the word originates. If you don't know what the Three Sisters is, I'll simply tell you real quick. That's where you're going to be planting a large edible grass like corn, and then you're going to be planting something that grows well with the corn. So you plant the corn, you let it grow for several weeks until it has at least 3 leaves. About the 3-leaf stage is about right. If it has 4 leaves, it's not too late. If it doesn't have 3 leaves, it's too early to plant your other stuff. So wait till your corn has 3 leaves, and then plant things like green beans, whole beans that can grow up the corn stalk. And you could plant cucumbers, melons, squashes, that type of thing with the corn. So you have those 3 different plants. It's 3 different plant families, and it helps to have lots of diversity. And so that is what we want happening in a milpa type Three Sisters garden system. Now, modern science has taught us that you need to have a minimum of 4 plant families to get the maximum benefit of disease and pest resistance. So you can have that cucurbit family, which is all those vining things like the melons, squashes, pumpkins, and cucumbers. So that's 1 plant family. And then the corn is 1 plant family, and beans would be 1 plant family. So let's get another one in there. Let's plant some taproots. Let's get some something like a carrot or a parsnip in there. Those would be fantastic things to have in the garden. You could do beets, you could do lettuce, you could do potatoes. Some of the best potatoes I've ever raised was last year in my corn patch. They did fantastic together. And they were in the shade under that corn most of the summer, but there were big, nice, beautiful tubers under the ground. So yeah, milpa gardens are pretty fantastic. Now, the one thing we need to realize that the genius of the milpa garden is they had the Three Sisters idea with the 3 plants we've talked about, but then they would grow them with the native plants that were already there, the jungle plants, the trees that were producing fruit, and many other things. And they would just kind of grow these more tame crops with the wild things that were growing out there in the jungle already. They could have had 15 plant families, as far as I know, because there's a lot of different plant families that are growing in Central America. So they probably had some of the very best nutritious and best flavored crops in the world. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What to do in the fall to prepare the garden for winter? So you want to have a living root in the soil all summer and all fall and all winter and all spring. Whenever you can have a living root in the soil, you want that. You don't ever want to have a time of the year when you don't have living roots in the soil. So you never want bare ground. And so what I'm telling you is not just for the fall and winter, but this is year round. Always keep your ground covered And always keep living roots in the soil. So where we get lots of snow here, what in the world are we going to have that's living through the winter? Well, I plant garlic, but I don't plant enough garlic that it's everywhere. And I don't want garlic everywhere, but it will live through the winter. I have a nice garlic patch out here. It's beautiful. It's growing very well. And I planted it last fall in September. And it, we had 20 below weather here several nights throughout the winter. And we had feet of snow. So the cold temperatures didn't bother it because it was under feet of snow, but it's very hardy even for very cold temperatures. Other things that will overwinter are all of the grains. So wheat, oats, barley, rye, triticale, all of those things will overwinter. They're annual crops, so they last 1 year, but they will grow through the winter. So those are fantastic things to use in different parts of your garden. And they are very good for your soil health to help your soils function. So those are some ideas. Two main things. Number one, keep a living root in the soil, whatever it is. Number two, keep the garden covered. You don't ever want to have bare ground. And the reason I say that is it has been traditional for people at the end of the gardening season to till up their gardens, and then that bare ground is exposed all winter. That is a big no-no. We don't want to do that because it will decrease your microbes in the soil. And the last question, no offense, but your garden looks like chaos. What can I do to have a healthy garden but keep it looking orderly? Okay, so this is fantastic. I love this whole idea. And it's absolutely true. My garden is chaotic. My garden's full of weeds. My garden is a mess. I own that, absolutely, and I'm okay with that. I also love the Charles Dowding type gardens that you see in, the garden shows in England. I don't know of too many gardening shows in the United States, but in England, there's these fantastic gardening shows, and everything is precise and beautiful. And it's like you can measure things with a tape measure, and everything is perfectly spaced, and the plants are all exactly the same size. And it's actually quite glorious and wonderful. My garden is the opposite of that. It's truly a jungle. The reason that I do that is for soil health, and I'm trying to maximize the good genetics in the plants when I am growing this garden. So I want 5 or 6 plant families, and I want them all mixed up. It's simply a different aesthetic. So if you want to have a garden that looks really pristine and glorious and beautiful, you're going to have to sit down with a pencil and a paper, and you're going to simply have to figure out what you like. What aesthetic do you like? And then figure out, for the soil health side, which plants can you put together that look good together that you can mix up so you can have your minimum of 4 plant families. If you don't want to mix up plants at all and you simply want one crop here and another crop over there, then you're going to have to do it like the big farms do it, because they will grow a monocrop during the growing season. And then in the off season, meaning the fall, winter, and early spring, that's when they grow their chaotic 20 or 30 or 50 species cover crop that'll grow up, and then they roller crimp that down, and then they will have, during their main growing season, one crop that they grow so that it's manageable, it's harvestable, it's saleable. See, if I grow 50 grains together and then I run my combine through the field, I doubt they would even grow to maturity, because it would be a mess, But if a grain was ripe, there's too much plant matter out there, and it would clog up the machines that we harvest with. And if you did have 4 or 5 grains that you were harvesting at once, they'd all be mixed up. And if they were small grains like oats, barley, and rye, and wheat, there's nobody out there who's going to buy that grain from you. A bread maker wants either oats or barley or rye or wheat. They don't want them all mixed up. So it doesn't work in commercial farming to try to grow all that stuff together. It's just a mess. It's very chaotic in a bad way. But my garden is chaotic in a good way because it's a small garden. I can do it by hand. And so I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to pick what I want when I want it. And so it works. So you simply have to pick the aesthetic you want and then do a landscape design, something that pleases you, and then just run with it. It's going to take some work. And it's too bad because there's not a lot of people doing this. I wish I could recommend a book to you that talks about this. Probably if you look up Charles Dowding, he's the closest. He has some of the most beautiful gardens. He's in England. He's on YouTube. You could look him up. He has some of the most beautiful gardens I've ever seen. It's very aesthetically pleasing, and he is building soil. Very good. So maybe I ought to take one of my beds for the people who want it to look a pristine way. But right now, I'm not going to do that because I'm super excited about mimicking nature, because it's so fascinating when you walk out into nature. That's where I have found the most healthy plants in the world, is out in nature, and it is just chaos out there. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, for those of you who are on live, if you have a question about gardening, farming, the Georgic tradition, politics, whatever you want, you can ask your question right now. So we can open this up. But right before you ask, I just am putting this up here for everybody to see, to remind you that these are the way that I help people to grow food. I've got my YouTube channel, my weekly Q&A, which is what this is, my Patreon channel. I'm a soil laboratory. I can look at the microbes in the soil and tell you how your soil is doing. I teach my 17-week farmer training boot camp. I've got my 3-day boot camps. I'm available for consulting, and my book is done. And if you don't have a copy, get to my website at www.georgicrevolution.com, and you can order your copy immediately. So questions?
I have a quick question.
Go for it, Zeke.
So I have my camera turned on here so you can see it because there's daylight this time.
Okay, hold on.
Let
me stop my screen share real quick. Give me just a second, and then it will show up better on everybody's screen, hopefully. All right, go ahead.
All right, so right here, from here to there, I have a 15-foot by 15-foot big square of straw that I laid down, and I mixed in some chicken feed, and I let it rot over the whole fall and winter, and then in spring I planted in it. So what you see coming up is potatoes and winter wheat, and there's some other things, but mostly potatoes and winter wheat. Now, I am wondering if there might have been a better way to do this. Should I have mixed in potting soil type stuff with this when I laid it down? Should I have mixed in like a bark mix or something else, or was using all just the straw and a little bit of protein sufficient? What do you think? Because I'm thinking about doing another one of these, and I want to know if there's a way I could improve upon it.
Okay, so are you having any problems with it?
My only problem with it is that apart from potatoes and winter wheat that can get rooted in the winter, it's really hard to get anything actually started in it, especially from seed and even transplants. So over here, I planted a bunch of cabbages, and there's only one that's kind of still there. And same thing with carrots and such. It's really hard to start anything from seed. The potatoes do good, and the winter wheat did good because I started it before it snowed, and so I don't know why it did good, but it did. And so that's kind of the thing. I'm wondering if I could have done something to make it a little bit easier and actually starting seed in this.
So how thick is that? Can you walk over and kind of pull that detritus back a little bit where you planted your cabbages where they didn't do well? And let's just see how deep it is, down to where the dirt is, the soil, the original soil. So it looks kind of deep. Is it like 4 or 5 inches?
It's as deep as my hand is long.
So 6-8 inches,
maybe 6 inches. Yeah. And then it's
so,
worth noting it hits cardboard. It's worth noting that I put cardboard on this because I was killing out lawn.
but it's sat there all winter, right?
Yep.
And the lawn is dead and gone. So here's what you do. See how you just made that hole there?
Yep.
At this point, where it's already been months and months and the grass is dead and gone, make little holes like that, pull it back, dibble your hole down in, which means you just poke a hole in with a sharp stick. And then that's where you put your transplant in. So it would go through the cardboard because your cardboard is mostly decomposed now, right?
Yeah, I could, with a couple scratches, I can get through it with my finger.
Yeah, so the grass is already dead and gone. So go ahead. I would just move back the detritosphere of the old straw, poke a hole, and get your cabbage plant right down in there. So that the cabbage roots are in the soil, and then you can gently move the straw back against the stem of the plant just a little bit. Make sure it's not getting shaded at all. That's how I would have that one.
Okay. And that'd go the same for most of your early succession crops?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I have one quick follow-up. Let me see if I can find it. I have, especially around my winter wheat, I have a fungus that's coming up. It's this hard stuff right here. It's fungus. And it grows around, and I'm wondering if it's good or bad.
Is it killing
when you get it wet?
Plants?
No, they're growing up right through it, nice and healthy. Like, look at that.
Okay, well then it's not bad. Bad fungus kills your plants and they don't grow. Dig down underneath there. Dig your hand in there. Get a big handful of the dirt, as deep as you can dig with your hand. So I don't know if that's 2 inches or 6 inches. Get a big hunk of dirt and smell it right now, and tell me what you smell.
That's interesting.
Okay, so you're not smelling the detritosphere. Get the soil underneath it.
Oh, well, let me dig down. Right here, it's probably 1.5 feet down.
Really? That's deep, man.
I didn't fool around with this.
This is getting serious.
Up to my elbow. There's some dirt.
It looks like you're having fun. This is hilarious. Okay, smell that. My students are all behind me laughing. This is funny.
It smells like pottery soil. Like when you buy pottery soil, it's like clay. It smells like that.
So is that a good smell or a bad one? Does it smell fresh and clean and revitalizing like a forest floor?
Not quite that good, but it definitely doesn't smell like a toilet.
Oh dear, yeah, you did know what that meant. So it doesn't have a sewer smell.
No, not at all.
Okay, but it's pleasant, right?
Yeah, it's a good smell.
Okay. You would take it in and put it on the kitchen table, that smell.
Yeah. If I had a candle that smelled like that, I'd burn it in my house.
Okay, well then it's a pleasant smell. That means it's basically aerobic, which means high oxygen, which means fantastic good, which means you probably don't have any disease-causing fungus that's going to cause you a problem.
Oh, good.
Now, if you need to know for sure because you're making money with this project, which you're not because it's a home garden, but if a farmer was listening to this, what you do is you grab a bunch of that soil right where that fungus is growing, put it in a Ziploc bag, send it to me. I'll run a soil test and I'll tell you for sure if it's an omycete, which is a disease-causing fungus, or if it's like a really good fungus, because we could find it in the soil sample and figure it out. Okay, good. That was awesome. We have a question here in the chat. Lindsay asks, 4 roots together, will 3 show any benefit? Okay, yeah. So what we have found is that the more diversity you have, the more benefit there is. But there is something really technical that happens with 4 different plant families. So we got to think about what the family means. It's not varieties of plants. It goes further. It goes way up the genealogy of how plants are classified scientifically. So it's not the varieties. It's not the species. It's not the genus. It goes to the family level. So it goes back. Plants have to be really unrelated for this to happen. So what happens with the 4 plant families is, and we don't know why this happens, but when you have 4 plant families together, it grows a maximum number of beneficial microbes in the soil. So we don't really know why that happens, but it does. That's what we have observed in all the soils around the world that have been tested by all the collaboration of the scientists I've been working with. And all of those microbes, they turn on genetics in the plant roots that are growing there that won't get turned on unless you have 4 plant families. If you have 3 plant families, those genetics don't get turned on. Now, the genetics belong to a certain, I don't even know how to say this right, but there's different things that plants do, and we call them metabolites. So there are primary metabolites, and then there are secondary metabolites. So primary metabolites are things that are easy to quantify. So how big a plant gets, how heavy it is, your yield per acre. Those would be things that are easy to measure. The secondary metabolites, they get turned on, but they're harder to quantify. So a human, this is an analogy, a human secondary metabolite would be like love or caring or nurturing. Well, I love my wife a lot. And somebody else would say, oh, but I love my wife more. Well, we really don't know. It's just two fools arguing. There's no way to quantify that. So when it comes to secondary metabolites in plants, we're talking about disease resistance. Well, how much disease resistance? Oh boy, that bug, it didn't eat that plant at all. Yeah, but how much? So it becomes really hard to figure that out. Tastes, flavors, nutrition levels. We can quantify and measure nutrition levels, but we can't really quantify taste, because if you hate tomatoes, then the best tasting tomato just tastes worse to you because there's more flavor. So it's hard to quantify secondary metabolites. It's really hard to figure it out. But from a commercial farming perspective, or from the backyard farmer or gardener who really wants to feed themselves the best food, start mixing up all your plant families, and you start getting the best flavors. You start getting the highest nutrition, and miraculously, your pest and disease pressures tend to lessen miraculously. And in many gardens, we have reports that they have 0 pest problems, but the pests are there. So the bugs are present, but they're not eating the plants in your garden. Okay, so Lindsay followed up here. Example, turnips, corn, beans, and melons. Barley and corn, too closely related. Barley and corn, they are grasses. So this is a pretty new science. I don't know of any scientists out there who have published anything to show that different plants within the family, how far apart the relation needs to be. So just to keep it really simple, like turnips, those are going to be in the brassica family, corn's in the grass family, beans are in the legume family, melons in the cucurbit family. That'd be perfect. So barley and corn, maybe a little too closely related. I don't know. Here's what we need. We need thousands of farmers and gardeners doing these kinds of tests and figuring out what is really working and publishing this stuff so we can learn more. This whole thing, it's only about a decade old when the plant pathologists figured this out, that it was 4 plant families. So, it's brand new. It might be 20 years before this makes it into the universities. And by then we'll know more stuff. And then, because as people are learning, we're able to learn tons more stuff. So it's super awesome. Okay, good questions tonight. Amber's on here. You don't have to say anything or write a question, but if you do want to ask something, go ahead. And we are here. We can answer it before we close up shop. Students, do you guys have any questions? They're all behind me, so I called them students. That was not very personable. They call me teacher, so actually they never have said teacher. Any questions, anybody?
You should turn your background off so we can see them.
Really? Do I know how to run that kind of technology? Wow. I do know how, but I have to click this one instead of that one. Virtual background. How do I turn this off? None. Wah wah. There's Jessie J. She came to visit for a week. She's my graduate from last year, one of them. And then here's my other students. There's Kirsten and Will and Becca. And my other student is doing something else, probably working in the garden because they're scared to death that they're going to starve to death at the end of the year. Okay, this has been fun. Thanks for being here. And let me check my chat. Oh, it was already open. Huh. I opened a poll. Look at that. I should do a YouTube on how to use Zoom. Okay, we're going to close this up. Next week, am I on next week? I am. But in 2 weeks, I'll be gone for 2 weeks because I'm teaching a seminar at Monticello College in southern Utah. And so for 2 weeks, I won't be doing this. But next week, I will be here. Same time, same place, same fun things we're talking about. Good night. Thank you for participating. And hopefully this has helped you to have the very best garden of your life.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Thank you.
The lost student. Happy New Year.